designed to encourage, empower, and educate real estate professionals by sharing best practices from business leaders that are proven winners. I'm your host, Kyle Malnati, and this is Calibrate Real Estate. Broadcasting from the Mile High City, thank you for tuning in to the Calibrate Real Estate Podcast. This is episode 69. Thank you to everybody who has subscribed to our podcast. If you haven't left us a review, you can leave it anonymously. You don't have to write something, but we would love a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. That really helps us get this message spread out to more people. The way that podcasts are rated definitely helps as people are looking at finding a new podcast. So if you enjoy this real estate content, please leave us a 5-star review. Okay, so this content is going to sound familiar in a certain way. Stephanie Lanier has been a past podcast guest, episode 53. I was the MC. I was honored to be the MC of our 30 Under 30 reunion just this month in Charleston, South Carolina. Well, the way that it worked is Brad Allen got Stephanie Lanier to be our keynote speaker for the morning session. Brad has been a previous podcast guest, and as you're noticing a theme here, I'm buddies with pretty much all the people that we have on this show, which is pretty cool because I'm learning alongside of you, and I'm really gaining information and able to interact with some really, really neat people. So Stephanie shares her story and shares a powerful message about purpose in that you can create the things you wish existed. This was the keynote speech in front of an audience of about 100 people in Charleston, South Carolina. You'll hear me as the MC introducing her, and Stephanie talks about her journey of basically finding a way to create things that don't exist in the marketplace currently that she wished existed and creating a business out of them. Couple of things to note. I have had so many great conversations with people that are in the 30 Under 30 alumni group, and you know that lots of them have been podcast guests. I actually was on a phone call, a conference call with Tara Moore, who was one of our earlier podcast guests last year, and she was on our Working Mom panel in the Denver 2018 Mastermind. So Tara and her husband, Matt, are looking at doing some different things with their real estate investments. And because they know that I specialize in real estate investing, we were on a 45-minute conference call, literally just this morning. So I'm sincere in that I say that the people that I interact with on the podcast are people I interact with outside of this medium. And I just want you to know that this is a real powerful group of people that I learn from and that I also contribute to. So just enjoy this episode, and also know that if you want to hear past masterminds, episode 19 through 28 were all our 2018 mastermind in Denver. This is going to be the first installment of the Charleston, South Carolina 2019 30 Under 30 mastermind. So the next several episodes are going to be from that content. Well, enjoy. And as I love to say, I will see you around the neighborhood. Here's our intro of Stephanie Lanier. Thanks. So without further ado, podcast number 53, I had the honor of interviewing Stephanie Lanier, our kickoff speaker. Stephanie has some really, really special messages to share with you today. This presentation is all going to be about creating the things that you wish existed, and it's about really bringing to life things that need to be out in the marketplace. Stephanie is coming off of a TEDx experience where she was actually a TEDx speaker, so she is a real pro. She's a great Instagram follow. If you're into that, I certainly am becoming an avid Instagram-er. And so, Stephanie, please come onto the stage, and we'll get started with her presentation.
Thank you guys so much. I'm so honored to be here, and as a person who's not a 30 under 30, I was a little nervous coming to your group, but you've been so welcoming and wonderful. So without further ado, we're gonna go ahead and get into this program. Now I know how to use the clicker. That's good. Okay. So we're going to talk about creating the things that you wish existed, and I'm going to share a little bit about my personal journey, and hopefully it will help you thinking about what you want to create that you wish existed. So on a hot August morning in 2010, I was standing on a pavement. I was looking forward. My hands were laced through a chain link fence. And I saw the tiny body of my son Oliver, which you can see here, on a stretcher. He was being pulled towards a helicopter by two people in a jumpsuit. The wind was whipping my hair from the blades of the helicopter. The ground was shaking underneath of me as the helicopter lifted with my one and only son. You see, they had told us earlier that morning that Oliver's brain was bleeding and that he would need emergency neurosurgery at UNC Chapel Hill. Earlier that morning, we had tried to wake him up. His body was sort of like twitching and tremoring. We didn't think that much about it, except that over time it got worse until he had a full-blown seizure. I remember my hands were shaking as I opened my flip phone and I dialed 911. And I ran out into the street trying to track down the ambulance. So when they got to that local hospital, they couldn't stop the seizures. And on the CT scan of his brain, they saw something that looked like a brain bleed, or worse, a tumor. So my husband and I, as our son was lifted into the air, we got into our minivan, and my father-in-law drove us 2.5 hours. The thing you might not know is you can't go on a life flight with your loved one. You have to drive to meet them. So when we got to UNC Chapel Hill, it was good news. They had stopped the seizures. So on that helicopter ride, the seizures had stopped. And Oliver didn't need emergency brain surgery. So I'm thinking, this is great. Our life is going to be okay. We're going to go back to normal. But that feeling of relief only lasted for just a moment. We got up to our room and they got us settled because, of course, we needed to figure out why was this happening. Because before this day, we had a healthy, typically developing baby boy. And now something was wrong. I'll never forget in his room, as he was in his bed, a huge team of doctors made a semicircle around our bed. And they said to my husband and I, they said, Mom and Dad, we know why your son had seizures. And we know why we saw lesions in his brain. Your son has a rare genetic disorder called tuberous sclerosis complex. And at that point, my brain went a little bit blank. I honestly didn't know what it meant, but I figured it wasn't good. They said some more things, but there are two more things that I remember. They said, actually, Andrew, who's my husband, you have it too. So you have a really mild form of tuberous sclerosis, and then our son Oliver is very severe. And you say, how did my husband not know? Well, on the very, very mild span of things, you just have these skin manifestations. So we always thought he had bad rosacea or something, but that actually is tiny tumors on his face. And then he has this weird little patch on his back, which we thought was a birthmark, but it's actually part of tuberous sclerosis. Other than that, my husband, happy, healthy, no physical issues at all. And then we have our son Oliver all the way over here. But the second thing that they told us is that it's genetic, and so there's a 50% chance of other children having this disorder. The night before, I was at a cookout with a healthy family of 3. We were about to have more children, and in the blink of an eye, all of a sudden, 2/3 of my family has a rare genetic disorder. I was 28 years old. It was a lot. When the doctors left our hospital room, I walked down to the parent lounge because, again, this is 2010, so you can't Google on your phone. So I typed in tuberous sclerosis. I didn't know how to spell it, but Google knew what I meant. And so the first result that came up, I clicked on it. And when I clicked on it, tears just streamed down my face as I was scrolling down. Tuberous sclerosis causes tumors to grow in the heart, the eyes, the kidney, the lungs, the brain, the skin. It is the leading genetic cause of autism and epilepsy. Children who have seizures who aren't well controlled have cognitive delays, developmental delays, and often need care for the rest of their lives. It was just a staggering realization. So we packed up from that trip to UNC Chapel Hill, and the doctor said, hey, Mom and Dad, one more thing. Make sure Oliver does not have seizures. If he doesn't have seizures, everything actually might be okay. We can kind of manage with medications. Hopefully he'll develop typically. So we went back home and tried to adjust to our new normal. But in November of that year, he began to do this weird thing. His arms would fly forward, and then his head would drop. And it would happen like that, just this reflex. And my mother's intuition, which you should always listen and trust, told me you should do something about this. So I emailed the neurologist and I said something like, Oliver's arms are flying out and his head is dropping. And that phrase, head drop, I had no idea was so important. So they said, come into the hospital immediately. So they hooked him up to an EEG, which is where, they put stickers on your head and they read your brain waves. And they said, your son is having infantile spasms. And I said, what's that? And they said, it's a catastrophic form of childhood epilepsy. And basically, no child that has infantile spasms is okay. And not only will your child have delays, but he is going to regress if we can't stop them. So our son, who was feeding himself and kicking a soccer ball and talking, began to lose these things rapidly. It was like we were losing him every single day. So we went up and down the East Coast looking for researchers, doctors, treatments for him because we knew that time was of the essence. I mean, development when you're 1.5 and 2 years old is just critical, right? So we landed on a team in Boston at Mass General Hospital. They have a tuberous sclerosis clinic. So they have an entire interdisciplinary team of all kinds of people. And there they said, we recommend a 2-part brain surgery because there's a 50% chance he'll be seizure-free. And that was like a miracle, So we said, yes, we want to do that. We want to see if he can have this miracle. So they took out all of his left temporal lobe and part of his left frontal lobe. And before we left the hospital, he had the seizures again. They came back. When we got home from that trip, I just felt crushed. I felt like a rock that was like pulverized into powder. It felt like our whole life ahead of us was just going to be hard and difficult and scary. And you know how I told you the ground was shaking? It felt like I was standing on the edge of a chasm, like you're looking over and you have no idea how to take the next step or how to move forward. And so my husband, Andrew, and we said, I need to go back to work. At that time, I was a stay-at-home mom. And this is the helicopter, and this is our son, Oliver. That helicopter ride was $17,000. That was one bill, so you can imagine how much the brain surgery cost. So obviously being a stay-at-home mom was not lucrative for us. And then before that, I was a social worker. And my first full-time social work job, I made $17,000 that year. So I'll tell you this because you're realtors, I was like, I'm either going to sell drugs or houses because these are my 2 options. How are you going to make $17,000? So I took the real estate class. I liked it. My husband had, like I said, had been in real estate before, so we knew a little bit about the industry. But I looked and looked for a brokerage. I said, okay, I have a medically fragile child. I'm going to need a place to hang my license. And in real estate, I was after 2 things, which I'm sure you were after: flexibility and financial stability for my family. That was sort of, if I looked into the valley, that's what I needed to kind of get on the other side of. I needed to basically create the career I wish existed because I had this powerful reason. But then when I looked for the company that I was hoping exists, I just couldn't find it. I really needed a company that focused on a family-first mentality. As you can see, family means everything to me, and it probably does to you too. The other thing that I really cared about a brokerage having was great marketing. So I know this sounds silly now, but in 2012, which is when we launched our brokerage eventually, I really had seen the power of blogging with our son Oliver and felt like nobody was really leveraging social media. So social media, a family focus, and a place where I could really feel like if I was in the hospital with him or he was at a therapy or a treatment, there was a real team mentality that would support me. Not just like on the wall with some sticky notes, but really baked into the structure of the brokerage. And so I couldn't find the thing that I wish existed. And I felt like I was standing on that chasm, unsure of how to take the next step. But because of the bravery I'd seen with Oliver, and because we were facing life-threatening situations, I wasn't afraid. And I thought, I'm going to start a business. Why don't I create the company I wish existed? Which is crazy because I don't have an MBA. I mean, I was a social worker. I worked with homeless people under bridges. I didn't know how to do it. And yet, when you have to do something, you do. And I think many of us come into this industry for different reasons, but similar ones. So we started Lanier Property Group. And the first thing I want to say about creating the things that you wish existed is that you have to be the architect of that bridge, right? You have to kind of look in the valley and say, okay, we're getting from here to there, and here's how we're going to do it. But you have to have a crew of people with you to build it. You can't build a bridge by yourself. And that's really what creating the things you wish existed is about. It's how to get yourself basically up and over something together instead of going down alone. I think we're all tempted in hard times to say, I'm just going to do it myself. instead of saying, what if I lean into my social connections, into my friends, and we do this together? Because here's the thing that I've learned, is that if you're standing on the edge looking to a chasm of hardship, other people are too. I mean, maybe their child doesn't have a rare genetic disorder, but people are carrying their own hardships. And so we launched Lanier Property Group with our team. But when we launched this team, over time I realized that I needed a leadership philosophy. It wasn't enough to say, like, I'm the architect and we're going from A to B, but how do you do this? And how do you get a group of people on the same page? Almost, of all the agents on my team, only one of them was a realtor before, so we're teaching mostly people like me who are stay-at-home moms to sell real estate. So you'll see here the most important thing is a safe and positive culture. It's just absolutely critical that people can be themselves, that they're not spending energy putting on a mask when they come to work. So Daniel Coyle, in his book, Culture Code, which is excellent, talks about these kind of 10 indicators of really safe environments. You can just look at this briefly. We won't go through it. But one of the main things that I love in here is close proximity, often in circles. So our team is constantly just sitting all together. We're facing each other. We have lots of, number 10, small attentive courtesies. It's funny, we definitely do thank yous and opening doors because we're from the South and like everybody does that. But we also, if somebody is getting coffee in the office, like they ask everyone else if they want coffee. So this takes like 20 minutes sometimes because people are like, yes, I do, two lumps of sugar and cream. But this is a great guide for you when you're thinking about how to have a team culture that's safe and positive. So back to this little graphic that I came up with. Here you'll see that it's very much an us versus them mentality. If you have an us versus us mentality in your brokerage, your team, your business, it's unhealthy, right? You have to have a cultural fortress, which is what it says at the bottom. If you have a cultural fortress, nobody's stealing your agents. You don't have a recruitment or retention problem, ever. Bottom line here is trust. You have to have credibility, authenticity, and consistency. And what does it take to build all that? It takes time. You can't build credibility with people in 5 minutes, right? You have to invest the time. But the two most important things I want to talk about today is encouragement and accountability. You see that these are sort of the columns, if you will, that results are built on, but they're equal. I think in real estate, we're too focused on accountability and not focused enough on encouragement because people are facing these valleys of hardship, and the real estate industry is challenging. So when we think about encouragement, I'll share with you a funny story. So we had an agent at our firm, and we like to celebrate, we celebrate everything, but we like to celebrate milestones. So I got her everything bagels and flowers, which to me, I'm like, this is the best gift ever. Like, who doesn't love this? So I present it to her, and she's like, well, I'm on a low-carb diet, so I can't eat the bagels. And I was like, okay, but what do you think about the flowers? And she was like, I kind of think they're a waste of money, like they're not my thing. And I was like, okay, so it's no surprise she's not with us anymore. But it made me think, man, if I really want to encourage people because I know the kind of burdens that they're carrying from their personal life, I should have known that. I should have known that she wanted a green smoothie or a gift card or a note of thanks or a word of encouragement, and I didn't know that. So we created this thing in our, well, I'll tell you this, that people feel loved in the details. So at our office, we created this kind of, we call it Deets on Peeps, and it's a questionnaire people fill out. It has about 50 questions on it, but you can see I took people's names off, and I'm a little far away from it, but you can see that superpower, somebody wants to be like Mary Poppins and snap her fingers and clean her house. These are our real answers. There's another funny one on here I wanted to show you. Oh, I wanted to talk about church clap. All right, see at the top where it says, what's the best song to dance to? I'm not used to this laser pointer. Let me see if I can get it to do. Oh, see that? Okay. Church clap, this is our most conservative agent, who's our oldest agent in our team. This is her favorite song. And I was like, I listened to it, and I was like, oh, wow. And it's a Christian rap song, but it's like a real rap song, and it has a dance with it. It's a line dance, and it's a lot of hopping and stuff. Like, I don't know if you've seen it. It's hard to do. So I said, Lisa, can you do that? She was like, of course I can. I was like, no, you cannot. We played that, and girl was in her like floral twinset from LL Bean, just like cranking it out. And so when she has a big closing or it's her birthday, we play this song for her, right? That doesn't cost any money. It's about loving people. People feel loved in the details, right? But the other thing is that Mandy Maddox, who's one of our agents, is about to close the biggest deal in the history of our brokerage. It's a $2.75 million property at Wrightsville Beach, which in our market is a big deal. And I said, how can we celebrate you? What would you like to do? Because I think her husband and her kids think it's cool, but we know this is like a huge milestone in her career. And she said, I want y'all to do church clap. So everybody has been practicing this and like watching the video at home. Like seriously, look it up, it's not easy. And this Tuesday, hopefully we're gonna be church clapping it through our sales meetings. So I think what I've learned, and I think it's important for you to know as you build a team, is that people really do feel loved in the details, and this is free and easy. I have this in a Google Drive document on my phone. I have everyone's coffee order, so I know who's lactose intolerant or who doesn't want artificial flavors. This is easy stuff, right? And we can do that. And then again, you don't have recruitment and retention problems, because when the agent down the street calls your agent, why would they ever leave a place where this is happening, where they feel safe and encouraged? Here you can see birthdays up at the top. Andrew, who's my husband, he has a key lime pie. Lisa has a summer berry cake, and Elizabeth has a chocolate cake, because we know what people like. It's just so simple. Like everybody's worried about splits, when if you would just figure out what kind of birthday cake people want, they'll probably stay forever. Like seriously, I feel so strongly about this. And then we really make a big deal about work anniversaries. New Belgium has a really cool, they do Fat Tire, the beer, it's really good. But look up their work anniversary program, it's very, very neat. I think it's year 3 or 5, you get to go to Europe, you get to go to Amsterdam. Is that cool, right? We just give people jackets. Like you can see she's wearing the jacket, but I don't know, if we get to like 15 years, maybe you can go out of the country. And then this is the final thing that I'll say about encouraging your people. This is the Spectator, where a lot of us are staying. And last November, I took them on a surprise retreat, which I do every year. When is the last time you've been surprised for 36 hours as an adult? When you were taken somewhere and something just unfolded and a great meal and great laughter, a great class happened. This whole trip probably cost me $2,000, maybe $3,000, and then I had lenders and vendors come partner with me. When we started the trip, the women walked into the room and I had gift bags for them, just like lip gloss and stuff. There's nothing crazy. They're literally already getting emotional because they're saying, this is like Christmas morning. They're the moms. They're the ones making the bags for other people. So we come on this trip. We met with the Charleston Weekender, who's somebody you should follow. She's an incredible Instagram person, had a personal Instagram class. We ate a lot of great food. We had fun. And then when we were leaving, I said to them, hey, I have one more surprise. And they're like, no way, this has been so fun. And I said, at the office, one of the lenders has partnered with us, and they have an entire Italian meal that'll probably get you through 2 or 3 meals for your family for the rest of this weekend. And that's when people cried. Because it's like the simplest ways of loving people and saying, hey, I know how much work it was for you to pack up and get out of town and deal with all your kids' schedules and all of that so you could have a break, and let's just keep it going a little bit longer. Like that is why people stay at companies, and that is what builds strong teams. And 100% you're going to get amazing results if you invest in people in this way. So we have the professional thing working for me. We have Lanier Property Group, which is 7 years old now. We have a team of 8 agents, and we have a full-time salesperson, inside salesperson, and it's going great. We're growing very predictably, very slowly, very calculated, and it's been good. But then I found myself on that sort of valley, that precipice again. And this time I was staring down into really loneliness as a mom, because with Oliver's conditions and all the things that had happened, every single one of my friends, my close mom friends, had typically developing children. So they didn't understand the fact that literally every other day I was at CVS getting one of the 14 prescriptions refilled, because of course they couldn't all be refilled on the same day. That would make way too much sense, right? Things like that. I just needed to talk about that. And I thought, wouldn't it be cool if there was a group of moms and we could just wear our pajamas and we don't have to have on makeup and we could just talk about these things? Maybe we could crack open a bottle of wine or 2 or 3, who's counting, right? And we could just really share our hearts. And maybe we could feel like it was okay to complain about all the stuff that we're dealing with. We could whine about it. And then I thought, oh, that's a clever idea. Wine and wine, I like it. And so Wine and Wine was born. And these are my mom friends, and all 6 of us have children that are medically fragile or have special needs. And 4 of us will have children that live with us the rest of their lives. And so when we look at that valley and we're trying to figure out how do we bridge that? How do we go from our mid-30s to 50 or 60 with a child that needs care? And how do we kind of go up and over that together? And so we created the thing we wish existed. Just a little support group. but it changed our lives. And you have the power to do that too. Sometimes it's as big as launching a company, and sometimes it's as small as a group of moms in their pajamas opening up wine and sharing their hearts. One of the things that I learned from this, not only in my real estate business do you need an architect and a crew, right? I mean, to build something, you have to have a group of people. But if you build it, there are people that are going to come, and they're also standing there, and they're saying, I really had wished this existed too. I was at the end of my rope. I was losing my mind. And so I think to have the courage to build something and to invite people into it, that's leadership. And you guys are leaders. You're the leaders of our industry. You're people that folks thought had the vision to bring us forward into the future. And this is a really beautiful and great way to do that. So Lanier Property Group is growing. I have my Wine and Wine Moms group, and things are tracking along, but then I feel like I'm at this other valley of hardship. And this was where I was feeling lonely as a leader. So I'm running a company. I have a child that's medically fragile. My husband works in the film industry, so he works a ton of hours. And I'm beginning to be like the chair of the board and on the executive committee at the Chamber of Commerce, and things are happening. But I don't know where to go for leadership help. And when I come to real estate conferences, I mean, no offense, but it's just a lot of older men in suits on the stage telling me how to do this, and it just doesn't compute with my life. I got the advice one time that if I wanted work-life balance, I could just turn my phone off at 6 o'clock when I got home and then turn it back on at 8 or 9. And I was like, the more the guy talked, I was like, oh, you have a stay-at-home wife, so that makes sense. Like, she's cooked the meals, helping with homework, doing the laundry, but my second job starts when I get home, so what does that actually look like? You know, it was a disconnect. And then I heard at a real estate conference we were probably all at, somebody say, you know, if somebody on your team isn't producing sales after 30 or 60 days, just fire them. And I was like, oh, that doesn't fit my model of like this warm and cozy bubble of happiness. And so I was like, am I wrong? Is that the wrong way to lead a team? But we have these results that, I mean, like, it's working, and we're profitable, and it's healthy, and it's a, really, I feel like when I go into a team meeting, it's like, pinch me, this is better than I thought you could ever feel in a work environment. And so I was struggling with all this, and then that work-life balance thing and that self-care, like, what does this look like in real life if you don't have a partner who can stay at home and kind of run the other pieces of your life, or you don't have 2 or 3 assistants? That was also an advice I got, which was like, just get, you know, 2 or 3 assistants. And I was like, I'm not Oprah, you know? I feel like 1 assistant is kind of already over the top. So I started these luncheon events called the Inspiration Lab for Women in 2015, and we just got together and talked about all that. But the other things that we ended up talking about were like infertility, miscarriage, how in the world in the South we were going to keep taking these casseroles to people when we're working 60 hours a week. But this is like expected. I hosted 6 baby showers last summer in the span of 8 weeks. I mean, this is just like real life. I mean, my husband has hosted 0 baby showers in his life and taken 0 casseroles to anyone. And that's not a good or bad thing. It's just I want to be a loving part of my community, and yet I'm carrying all these other extra things too. So when we kicked the guys out of the room, we had a really great conversation about what it looks like. We laughed, we cried, and we said, it's okay to be generous with our love and encouragement of our teams, and that's our style of leadership. There are plenty of other ones. And so then in February of 2018, I hosted this event based off contentment. That was the theme, personal and professional contentment. And we sold it out really quickly, which might not be a big deal to you, but in our town, nothing sells out. It's like the most casual beach town ever. And then we had a waiting list of 35 people, which was crazy. We broke the fire code. There was 1 bathroom for like 98 women. It was pretty insane. But I thought, I want to know who these women are, and I don't want to just keep having these one-off events. Like, I want to build a community so we can walk through life together. And so at that event, we launched a membership community, which I also definitely didn't know how to do. Jimmy Mackin from Curator is a good friend of mine, and he helped me do it. He really pushed me to say, like, what's it going to take for you to take this more seriously and launch a second business? And I was so nervous about it, and he said, you know what, you're going to be the person who calls me in 2 years and still hasn't done this. I was like, oh, no, sir, I will not. I was like, how quickly can we build a website? And so we did. Curator helped me build a membership website in 2 days. The button didn't quite work. I mean, it was kind of a mess, but we had people that joined our membership community, and then people were paying me monthly, and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to, like, no, I got to do something. And so we just tried to figure out and try to build in that case, we're still constructing that bridge, right? It's not like my real estate company where the thing is completed and it has a strong foundation, it's working. It's kind of like we're building as we go. And so you'll recognize a famous face in here. That's Alyssa from our conference that we had in November. And it was a really beautiful time to get women together to talk about things that I just wasn't seeing on the conference circuit that I thought was really important. We didn't have very many sponsors. It was just a really honest, thoughtful conversation about what we can do to be better leaders and mentors and women. And it was just a huge gift. So the question I get asked the most is, how do you do it? And y'all probably get asked this too, right? A decent amount. Like, people are like, how are you juggling everything and doing it? And honestly, I didn't have a good answer. I didn't know exactly how I was doing everything. And so in the Inspiration Lab, I kind of came back to that model of, leadership model. And I thought, could we bake into this business this same thing, since it's worked so well in real estate? And so what we decided to do is to put women into lab groups, which are small groups, where they can get that accountability, right, which is critical. We're in real estate, like, you have to sell houses, and in real life, you have to get results, right? But also that encouragement, that grace that people need, the place to get that rest and that help for self-care and for work-life balance. And so we've used this model to create some content around, how do you do it all and not lose your mind? And so we called it Banner Your Blueprint. And I wrote this little workbook. And the first installment was like, how did 2018 go for you? And if you lived in Wilmington, it was a terrible year, right? We had a hurricane. It wiped our city out, basically. I mean, it was a really difficult year for most everyone. But then, how do you want to plan for your 2019? And then this is critical, number 3, like, don't be surprised if there are roadblocks and plot twists, which we learned on that helicopter pad. And many of you are old enough to have learned that, or you will. So I wrote that, and it was going really well. And then on the second quarter, so people are in lab groups, right? They're working through this content. The second quarter, I'm going to write the second insert. And unfortunately, our son was diagnosed with cancer. And so after all that he had been through, he was diagnosed in November of last year. He had one surgery. They got it out. It was stage 1. And so they told us, the oncologist said, you'll never see us again. This is over. And I was like, okay. But then in March of this year, they did an MRI scan, and they said, hey, we didn't get clean margins. There's still some in there. And so when I was writing this workbook, I was like, I don't want to be the woman who's like, push hard, hustle harder, make no excuses. Like, there are excuses. There are times to give yourself grace and rest and be okay. And you know what? That safe, warm, wonderful work environment that I made that people said was sort of, too easy and too cushy, it's the beautiful place to land if your life is like this. And everyone's life is like this. Right now, like, honestly, I'll tell you guys, we're waiting on a third opinion from Boston. We think that what will happen is we'll have another surgery in 6 months to a year. Renal cell carcinoma is extremely rare in children, and it's very slow growing. So we should have another story of they've gotten it all and it's a surgery. But this is my real life. And I'm also running a real estate company, right? And I'm also trying to launch the Inspiration Lab. And I don't want to make excuses, but I want to give myself grace. And I think it's both things. And as leaders, there's a lot of pressure on us just to kind of go out there and push through. And sometimes you need to let your team and the people around you love and care for you. And if you've made that environment correct, then your business will continue to run while you find yourself in a hospital doing these things. So in that second quarter workbook, I was trying to figure out how to make sense of all this, because in our Inspiration Lab, other people had had some really hard things happen. A parent had died. One of our members had an emergency heart surgery, and now she may not be able to have children in the first 90 days of her year. And so I thought, how do I speak to those people? And so I came up with these 4 circles: crisis, survival, thriving, and flourishing. And I think crisis is what it sounds like. That's like the moment you get the diagnosis, right? But then you move into surviving, which is a little bit like feeling like whack-a-mole. You know what I mean? When like things just keep popping up. And real estate's full of this. If you have like 10 deals going on right now, you're in whack-a-mole. It's just there's no way around it. And on top of that, in survival mode, you're double booking yourself. You're missing appointments. You haven't been to the dentist in like 3 years, which you really, really need to make that appointment. It just feels a little bit crazy. You're not at your best. And then there's thriving, and that's like where life is humming. And probably a lot of you are in that place because you're here at a conference and away from your home. And then there's flourishing, and that's when you're like able to launch a new thing, when you can pour into people because you are filled up spiritually, emotionally, financially, relationally. And so I felt like in our inspiration line, people had maybe spent more time in crisis and survival mode than they had anticipated. And I wanted to write something and create something that they could relate to. And I was thinking about, should I share this with you guys? And I thought, yes, because real estate is so focused on survival mode. That is so much of what we're doing because the industry is full of those plot twists, unexpected things that pop up. And so I have a few resources if you've spent a decent amount of your first quarter in crisis or survival mode. The first one is a book called Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers. It's an older book, but it's excellent. And I'll tell you really quickly, like basically here's the Cliff Notes on the book. When a lion is chasing a zebra, if the zebra doesn't die, then when it's over, the zebra goes from like that really heightened fight or flight mode all the way back down to baseline. So they don't get ulcers. What's happening in America? We get way up here because we have like a deal that's going sideways or our business partner was going to sue us or who even knows what happens. And then we only come to here, right? And we got all of this to go back down. And so chronic disease and that constant feeling of anxiety is there. So this book is excellent to talk about what's happening to you physiologically in that kind of stress response, especially if you're in a prolonged stress response. And then I love the book, The Body Keeps Score. I mean, like the therapist in me when I was a social worker, if you've had any kind of trauma in your life, you have to read this book because you need to understand how your body is holding on to that trauma. It's really incredible. That might be a game changer for you. And then if you don't read, because I know a lot of people don't, there's an HBO documentary that Sanjay Gupta did called One Nation Under Stress. It just came out, so if you haven't seen it, that would be really helpful too. I feel like as realtors, we have to take this incredibly seriously, our industry and just sort of all that's happening so that we can take care of the ones that we love and that we can be there in the hospital and that we can kind of help them through that. I think a lot of times it looks more like this. You know, it's not like your life is just one little bucket or one little circle and you're stepping in and out. It's just sort of a mess, right? You might start your Monday morning in crisis mode because all of your deals are going sideways, but then by the middle of the day, you're like, okay, I'm feeling a little bit better. I don't feel as crazy. So I don't want you to feel like it's just one thing or the other when it comes to sort of self-care and working through things. I feel like the best work-life balance or self-care analogy is this. It's a lot more like a song and a lot less like a balance beam. Balance beam and work-life balance is this idea of perfection, right? That you sort of always have to be, like, have you tried to balance recently? Like, it's a ton of concentration. It's really difficult. And if you fall over, that might be perceived as failure. But in a song, right, it's fast, it's slow. There's a melody, there's a bridge, there's a chorus. And I think that if you're thinking about your life and you have a decent amount of rules and pressure on yourself, thinking about it more musically than just out of perfection is really helpful. I love this quote. It says, the things you're passionate about are not random, they are your calling. And so when you're thinking about today, what bridge can you build? What valley of hardship are you looking into? It could be small, it could be big. You might be launching companies. You might be called to do something different. You know, you guys are leaders. You are the people that our industry has anointed and said, these are special people and they're going places. And so I want to challenge you today. What bridge will you build? What thing do you wish that was created, that was there? And go and do those things. Thank you.
Wow, holy cow. Stephanie Lanier bringing down the house early in the morning. Thank you so much. Yeah, so guys, we have a few minutes for Q&A, and I want you to take a second to write down a key takeaway. So take the first maybe 15 seconds before we ask Stephanie a couple of questions. 15 seconds, write down a takeaway, and then we'll go into a question.
All right, so I have a team of 9, and 7 of them are women.
Uh-huh.
Oh, Ryan Gillen from Dayton, Ohio.
Hi.
Yeah, so this was perfect. But how do I see what they're going through? How do I ask those questions? Because, I mean, their day-to-day is completely different than mine.
Yeah.
100%. And when they go on a showing, they have a completely different experience than I have. And I know it's hard for me to understand that as like a single guy, and some of them have kids, some of them have, you know, everyone's different situation. So how would I go by making sure that I'm understanding what they're going through?
Well, first of all, like, kudos to you for asking the question. You know, like, you're already far ahead. I mean, seriously. So 2 things. First of all, every week I text all of our agents basically like 3 questions, which is what's your stress level from 1 to 10? You need to clarify what 1 and what 10 is, because sometimes it's funny, like we'll get a 1 and I'm like, is that good or bad? You know, like, what did you mean by 1.5? So I send that. The second question is, what are you working on this week? And then number 3 is, how can I help you? So it's just a text to each person. Ideally, you would do this in person, but agents aren't in the office, so it's tricky. You're going to get a really good idea, and this is, you need to ask it personally and professionally. So then you're going to find out that 2 of their 3 kids have the flu, which you would otherwise not know. And then, if you're smart, you'll send Panera over there with some chicken noodle soup. Right? They'll deliver and drop it off. Like, there are easy things that you can do. The second thing is that, so one of the things we were doing with my team is I said, if we hit our second quarter goal, I'll take you to the Zillow conference. I've never been to Las Vegas. I thought this will be fun. But their faces were kind of not, they weren't feeling it. It was lukewarm. So after the meeting, I asked them questions, and Mandy was like, I have 3 kids. Like, that would be so much work to be gone 3 or 4 nights. That's not that appealing to me. And a few of the other agents said that. So I went home and I was like, what would be something they wouldn't do for themselves? And I said, if we hit our Q2 goal, everyone gets a deep clean of their house. We blew past that goal 20%. We've never, ever had a quarter with that. Seriously, again, people feel loved in the details, right? It's just knowing that a mom is maybe not going to do that. And literally, they did the baseboards, and my cleaning people called, and they were like, whoa, Nelly. I mean, it was expensive. But it was worth it. Yeah, the mom with 3 kids under the age of 5, that house needed some love. But they brought, like, my agents hugged me and brought plants and did, I mean, you could have spent that much money sending them to dinner, right? So it's just about understanding what makes them feel loved and cared for, and then trying to be really sensitive. The other thing I'll say for working moms, generally lunches are better. Like, cocktail hours and after hours stuff is really challenging. So we tell our lenders, like, don't try to take us to happy hour drinks. Take us to a really nice lunch. So some of it is just figuring out those pieces too. But yeah, if you ever like just haven't like want to talk about it, I'm happy to share with you all the things that we've done that have been successful, because our team right now is all working moms. Yeah.
All right, next question. Amanda. So Amanda in the front from Denver, Colorado. Specifically, Arvada, Colorado. Go.
I was asking about the Inspiration Lab.
Yeah.
So you're doing speaking engagements? You're just gathering at like churches or community centers?
Yeah, great question. I got a little excited. Yes, let me roll back. So we have 170 women who are members. It's a monthly membership fee. We have some online, $9. $9, yeah, I know it's so cheap, like you should just join. But that's why we made it $9, because we're like, well, that's kind of a no-brainer. But we have events and conferences. Some of them are online, some are in person. So I would say probably 150 of our members are local. Alyssa's one of the members and speakers. She could probably tell you more about it. But really, we're trying to help women solve this kind of work-life balance, leadership challenges, and we're having a conference November 13th in Wilmington, North Carolina, and we may have a Realtor Mastermind, because a lot of our members come from real estate, because that's where I came from as well. And so, yes, we have the workbook I told you about. That's kind of an every quarter thing. We have member meetups, we have conferences, we have online book clubs, different things, all the things I wish existed, all the things I wanted to engage with women. I wanted to be able to read books that were business books, but also books that were about loving people well and giving back to my community. And so just literally everything we do is something where I was like, I wish this thing happened. And y'all, I had this in my slides, but I took it out. At our conference, we ended our conference. This is so good. You totally should steal this idea. We ended our conference with live musicians with a sing-along. The last song was I Want to Dance with Somebody by Whitney Houston. If you want to see women lose their mind, play that song. Then we had a donut truck, and then we brought in puppies. We brought in puppies, and people held them and cuddled them and loved on them, and we had the puppies in the photo booth, because who can stop me, right? Like, I'm creating the thing that I wish existed, and I wanted to end a conference with puppies. So I'm just, like, my life is hard, right? Like, I'm dealing with a kid with cancer, and I have all these challenges, and yet I have the ability to go into conference with puppies. It's both and, right? We can hold, that's what leadership is. It's holding all of that together and say, I want to create a great experience for you. And you know what? That gives me fuel in the hard places of the hospital room to say, gosh, I have this community and I have something to look forward to.
All right, let's give Stephanie a big round of applause. All right, friends. So I have a couple just quick reflections here. Stephanie and I have a very common theme that we just kind of uncovered in our podcast interview. She went to an event called the EntreLeadership Master Series in Nashville, Tennessee, hosted by Dave Ramsey. I also went to the EntreLeadership Master Series. And it was a very powerful event, drinking from a fire hose for 5 straight days, learning how Dave basically went from bankruptcy to the last count that I heard having a valuation of $200 million business. And you learn, I actually got to hang out at Dave's house. It's not about that, but I feel like we're buddies now, which is really cool. But all kidding aside, one of the things that I learned at EntreLeadership is they have this phrase that they say often. And I kind of was like, oh, this is really cool. And I just never really knew where it came from. And I'm going to share it with you, and then I'm actually going to give you some context as to where it came from because I just thought it sounded cool. So Stephanie had just mentioned, and one of the key takeaways that I wrote down, and I really want you to focus in on this, EntreLeadership and Dave Ramsey, when they do their different presentations, they ask you for 2 minutes to sit there in that 5-day course and write down your takeaway after each session. And the biggest part of that is because you will be totally overloaded by the end of the day. For as high producers as we are, we have other stuff, we have the other demands, other things pulling at us, we all know that. So make sure that you write those down. I'll cue you to do that. My takeaway is we are all tempted during hard times to try doing it all yourself. And the phrase that EntreLeadership reminded me of all those years ago was damn the torpedoes. You guys ever heard of that? Couple? So I didn't know where it came from. And my wife, Courtney, is a huge Tom Petty fan. God rest his soul. That was Tom Petty's 3rd album, but that's not where the phrase comes from. The phrase actually is meaning to continue with the planned course of action despite known risks. Anybody feel like you've done that in your real estate career at some point? Continuing despite risks, continuing despite adversity. And it actually is quoted from David Farragut. Don't know if I pronounced that right. He's an officer in the Union Navy in the Civil War. After a warning about torpedoes, which were really water mines in the water ahead, he uttered that famous phrase, damn the torpedoes. And I think that when you face some adversity, and that's a lot of what we talk about in our podcast, and that's something I created because it self-soothes me. It's like a blankie to a 2-month-old. But all kidding aside, it is something that I have noticed throughout my career. There's been some real hard times and some hard adversity that I've gone through, that I've stepped through. Kudos to Rob Reuter and his team at Realtor Magazine. The reason why I'm a 30 under 30 is because I had nothing figured out when my brother died, and I didn't know how to deal with it, and I chose to write about it. And I had actually applied the year before, and many of you in this room may know that sometimes the 30 under 30 honor takes 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, Harrison? 6 different applications. And I'm not poking fun at Harrison. Damn the torpedoes, right? The whole point is this business will eat you up. And it will eat you up when you're least expecting it. I didn't expect to get that phone call from my brother telling me that my other brother had passed away. And at that time, our twins were 3 months old. And at that time, I was contemplating leaving my mentor. For those of you who were in Denver at our Mastermind, you saw Matt Ritter on stage with me. And I almost started, I don't know if you guys knew this or not, but during that interview, I almost started crying when I asked him about what it's like when people leave your brokerage. And that's something that Carlos and I have talked about and had plenty of time to share about what that feels like. So the point that I'm trying to make here is that there are some people in this room that are on an absolute high because they've gotten one of the best national recognitions you can get in our industry. This message may not mean a whole lot to you right now, but it may mean a whole lot to you in 2 years, and so I'd encourage you to keep coming back. There's some other people in this room who maybe the shine on that honor has kind of diminished a little bit, and you're going through something right now. Do not silently suffer. and I would encourage you to make sure you reach out to someone. I'll raise my hand because I've dealt with some stuff. There's plenty of people in this room who've dealt with some stuff. Stephanie's one of those. You need to use this community, and you need to really share what's going on, because I think in real estate, we have this tendency to put on this false bravado. And I know guys, I mean, we are so guilty of this. I think ladies are a little bit more in tune with it, but this is not that room. This is not the room where you're trying to one-up everybody and prove that you're cooler, better, etc. You've earned this spot here, and I just want to make sure that you know that there are people here that can talk to you. So if you want to learn more about Stephanie Lanier, Lanier Property Group, they're a boutique real estate firm based in Wilmington, North Carolina. I know that was a lot, and so I wanted to remind you of that's where she is, that's what she does. She's a great follow on Instagram. The Inspiration Lab, their mission is accountability mixed in with some encouragement, which I think is awesome. It's a subscription model, like she said. Jimmy Mackin, for those of you who missed it, he's been a Mastermind presenter several times. He is co-founder of Curator. #Watercooler is an awesome watch on YouTube. He's had Jay Baer and Gary Vee and a bunch of really cool thought leaders in the tech industry. And, I would just say that make sure that you tap into this group.